Hey everybody, welcome to Scenes from a Non-Existent Book. This is where I am releasing free chapters of the book I am writing as I write it. And if you haven't read, listened to, or watched that, then go check out the playlist in YouTube under podcast, or you can go to coreykerr.com/email, which will take you to my Substack, and you can check it out there. You should go read that stuff so that you understand what's going on here, because this chapter comes after another event. Legu Hemet groggily stretched his arms out as he yawned. He absent-mindedly scratched his chest and blinked open his eyes. The cold floor of the grocery store is a confusing place to wake up. Hemet tried to assess the situation. He was lying on his back, covered in and surrounded by breakfast cereal. His arm was cold. His face was wet. He heard the grunts and groans of those around him. Inevitably, people over 35 tend to make the same weird noises upon waking up from a deep sleep, whether they're laying alone in their beds or laying together on the floor of a grocery store. Hemet touched his mouth and drew back a hand covered in blood. His nose was bleeding. His ears were bleeding. Was he crying? No, his eyes were bleeding. He had a massive headache. Something was definitely wrong with everyone. He squeezed his eyes shut and quickly shook his head as if to shake loose an unwanted thought. Looking around, he saw that everyone was surrounded by scattered food and torn packaging. As he slowly started to stand, the horrors of his past came back to him. He was a child, a baby with pure survival instincts and no memories. He remembered it like it was yesterday, because it was. Everyone had lost their minds, crashed their cars, beat each other, soiled themselves, and eventually started looking for food. Screaming. Everyone had screamed the entire time. It was terrifying. He remembered understanding nothing. Why was everyone crying? He remembered crying because everyone was crying. He used to understand things, and he understood things now, but for the last 2 days, he hadn't understood anything. It was like he had no context, like being in a completely foreign environment. Hemet had no idea what was going on, but he knew who would. He stood up and started heading to the woods. The elders would know. Why did his knees hurt? He remembered crawling here. Most everyone had crawled everywhere. He remembered a few people rolling to get around, and one lady scooting along the ground with one of her legs tucked under her butt. They didn't know how to crawl. What was going on? I've got to get to the woods. His headache was making it very difficult to think things through. It wasn't a normal headache that came from stress or tension. It was like his skull was too small. Thinking hurt. The pain was everywhere, and each time he tried to process a thought, the pain would surge. His heartbeat felt like a kettle drum getting beaten right behind his eyes. What was he doing? I've got to get to the woods. Every step he took felt like the ground was electrified. His joints ached. He had a vignette of overexposed stars closing in on his vision. The thought, I'm going to pass out, caused a surge of pain, and his myopic view shrunk as the stars reached from the edges of his vision to the center. He began to shake violently like a hyper time-lapse video, and he was 18 months older. His headache was gone. His injuries were gone. His joints felt fine. Most importantly, he had the 20/20 clarity of hindsight. Because he had slipped forward, he remembered learning what had happened. The entire world lost all memory of everything, and for 2 days reset to an infant's level of experience. The headache his younger self had was the result of almost being killed by all of his thoughts and experiences returning at once. The return of memory actually did kill hundreds of millions of people. I've got to get to the woods now. Hemet started jogging down the road looking for a vehicle that could get him to the meeting spot. He jumped in an abandoned truck and headed towards the woods. There was no time to stand on ceremony, so he didn't bother getting his robes. The world had almost ended. Whether the timekeepers were properly dressed or not wouldn't matter at all. Nothing quite motivates you to go back to work faster than realizing that your absence caused the entire human population to scream for 2 days until a fifth of them died in some kind of information aneurysm. Hemet had gone on strike more in solidarity with his fellow dampeners than on principle. With the clarity of his future slip state, he was sure that the timekeeper strike had caused a global catastrophe never before recorded in history. Never in the history of the timekeepers had the dampening been so neglected as to permanently damage time. This was unprecedented. And like most unprecedented events, applying old solutions and thinking to the problem makes things significantly worse. Unfortunately, people have a terrible habit of applying old thinking to new problems. Conquistadors show up on the beach? They must be gods. Someone invents automobiles and people call them horseless carriages. Women start to find effective applications of various plants and people burn them as witches. In this case, the timekeepers stopped dampening when they went on strike, causing a worldwide catastrophic loss of memory and killing tens of millions of people. And if Hemet couldn't get to the woods in time, they would decide to go back to work and start dampening again. The problem was twofold. One, after the entire world experienced and remembered being reset to day one memory, the horrifying results of those 2 days were so heavy that no one needed dampening. Two, the timekeepers are an ancient organization run on tradition and superstition. They had no actual idea how or why dampening worked to keep people moored to the present. If Legu Hemet slipped back to his present age before he reached the woods, he would forget everything he knew of the future. If he slipped forward past his death, whether or not he remembered would be irrelevant because he'd be dead. He veered off the road and into the forest. Several scientists did know about the present particle and its effects on our perception of time, but these scientists had no idea that there was a secret organization working behind the scenes for thousands of years to keep a healthy balance of dampening in the world. The timekeepers knew that a certain amount of dampening was needed, but knew nothing about the particles and dark matter. Both groups had essential pieces of the puzzle, but no knowledge of the other group. Thus, no one was able to come to the logical conclusion that a little dampening readied the human mind to receive and process the present particle. Too little dampening, and people became unmoored from the present moment. Too much dampening, and, well, Hemet really needed to get to the woods. The amount of dark matter on Earth was decreasing, and with it, the supply of present particle was short. All the dampening in the world was making people's brains very accepting of the present particle, but there just wasn't enough present particle to go around. Future Hemet remembered months after the loss of memory. He remembered that as billions of people tried to bury their dead, rebuild their homes and neighborhoods, and put their lives back together, the timekeepers went about annoying everyone. But their efforts just didn't work as well as they used to, mainly because everything everywhere had radically changed. Society was on the brink of collapse, and the normal social contracts were metaphorically burning in the flames of everyone's memories of terrified, baby-minded adults screaming as they beat each other and fought for food. It's very difficult to cause a little bit of annoyance by driving too slow in the fast lane during rush hour when all of the freeways were covered in the smoldering, burnt-out husks of dead commuters' wrecked vehicles and rush hours ceased to exist altogether. One of the social contracts that used to be generally accepted was that the violence and rage directed at those who annoyed you was played out in your imagination. But as people remembered planes falling from the sky, they cared less about the social norms of polite society and physically attacked anyone who disrupted their day. This new threat of violence just under the surface of every interaction had two major results. First, there was a huge spike in empathetic thinking. Getting punched in the eye once or twice because you've inconvenienced someone is a great way to encourage everyone to consider the comfort and convenience of those around them. Second, timekeepers all over the world were being beaten in the streets. Hemet was getting closer to the secret meeting spot. The truck jolted this way and that as it lumbered along over the uneven forest floor. He was running out of time. Legu Hemet was in a singularly rare position to save the world. As a ranking member of an elite, centuries-old secret society, he knew secrets of time that had been passed down through ancient rites and rituals. In the future, he would see the folly of dampening after a worldwide catastrophe, and he would seek out and befriend key members of the scientific community. Together, they shared their knowledge to merge the arcane and the intellectual. They solved the problem with time, but too late to implement it. It was like a student having a brilliant stroke of inspiration about the test as the scantrons were being passed to the front and collected by the teacher. And he had slipped forward in time at the exact moment when this future solution could be implemented for maximum effect in the past, or the present. Truly, he felt that he was being guided by some cosmic force or greater power to save humanity. That greater cosmic force should have been paying a little more attention to its guiding, because as he was thinking of the fortuitous timing of this forward slip, he slipped forward again and wrapped the front of the truck around a tree. The impact snapped him back to his present age, and he reshaped the top of the steering wheel with his forehead. And so, the timekeepers were never informed of future Hemet's vital information and adopted the exact wrong strategy. They never reached out to the scientific community with what he learned, became completely irrelevant, and scientists continued to have no idea how to stop the loss of dark matter. Time passed quickly over the next few months as people banded together to rebuild the world and mourn their loved ones. It passed quickly because everyone was too busy rebuilding to be bored, and because people had generally lost the ability to process the passage of time. Neighborhoods, cities, and nations were repaired. It took some time, but no one really knew how long. The weather had stopped changing in a predictable pattern. There were often weeks and occasionally days where people experienced all 4 seasons. The Scottish people didn't notice the change in the weather because Scotland's weather had always done this. For the rest of the world, it made the passage of time impossible to measure for a while. And so, after some time, the people of Earth rebuilt, healed, and moved on. During this time, but at a different speed, another generation passed on the ship traveling into the deep recesses of space. That is the next chapter. I was going to get this out a few days ago, and my 5-year-old decided to stabilize himself as he was sneaking into my studio by grabbing the bookshelf, and it came off the wall. And so I had to come in and redo everything in my studio. So it's all different. So better. These are way better than the IKEA garbage that I had on the wall before. But anyway, if this is your first time, go back and listen to those other ones again, podcast in the YouTube playlist or coreykerr.com/email to get to that. And you can check these out. I'm releasing them for free. Remember to like the video if you're watching it up until this point. Leave a comment. Anything like that. If you want to hit the share button, you don't even have to do anything else. Just hit that share button and it'll, tell YouTube that it's worth sharing. Check out my stuff at coreykerr.com. Sign up for the email newsletter at coreykerr.com/email, and we will catch you guys next time. Go make stuff.